The corridors of the chaos-forged cathedral stretched endlessly, lit by the cold, flickering glow of promethium torches. Every surface was etched with runes, some of them pulsing faintly, resonating with a power that made my teeth ache and my small hands tingle. We moved carefully. Mara and Jessa pressed close to me, their breathing shallow, as if the slightest sound might summon the overseers upon us. I tried to steady my own pulse, but the hum of the forge, now part of me, kept it in an uneasy rhythm that was almost too loud in the quiet. The overseers' voices echoed through the halls, harsh and jagged, laced with anger at the broken machinery above. I could see their shadows stretch across the walls like grotesque predators, their heavy forms moving with deliberate menace. But I knew they were slow. They were constrained by fear and by habit, bound to follow patterns they believed unbreakable. We were small, invisible, and the forge itself guided us. It whispered in sparks, in the vibration of metal, in the flow of circuits that only I seemed to sense. A door loomed ahead, larger than any we had passed, and adorned with symbols of the chaos gods, their shapes writhing in flickering light. Beyond it, the heart of the forge waited, massive, impossible machinery that no child should ever touch. Yet the sentinel's pulse guided my hands, showing me a path through the deadly, humming conduits. I held my breath and stepped forward, feeling the heat of the molten rivers that ran through the floor and walls. The smell of scorched metal and ozone filled my nose, bitter and sharp. Mara whimpered softly, and I laid a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," I whispered, though my own voice shook. "We follow the light." As we entered the central chamber, the scale of it struck me. Gears larger than houses turned with agonizing slowness, their teeth glinting with promethium soot and blood. The machinery was alive in a way the overseers could not control. It breathed, it listened, it judged. Sparks leapt from the coils as though the building itself resented our intrusion. Yet when I reached out, it bent to my touch, flowing around my fingers like liquid obedience. For a moment, I felt the impossible, power. Not the cruel power of the adults who tormented us, but something far older, colder, and precise. We weren't alone. From the shadows, small creatures scuttled, servitors malformed by chaos yet obedient to the cathedral. Their eyes glowed faintly, following our every movement, sensing our intrusion. They were dangerous, yes, but predictable. One misstep and we would die. But if we moved with the rhythm of the forge, they would part like the tides. I led Mara and Jessa in silence, each step measured, each breath timed to the pulsing vibration beneath our feet. Above us, the overseers were converging, their anger growing like a storm. The shouts of adults rang through the corridors, carrying with them the threat of violence. Yet I could feel the forge itself preparing. It recognized our audacity. It recognized that small bodies could think and act in ways that the massive, predictable forms above could not. The sentinel's pulse echoed in my chest, a silent drumbeat of inevitability. We were becoming instruments of a force older than the chaos-forged world itself. Mara stumbled, nearly losing her balance on the slick metal floor. I caught her wrist, steadying her, and whispered, "Not yet. Wait for the pulse." The hum flowed through me, guiding my actions, timing our movements. Sparks crackled dangerously close, molten droplets sizzling against the metal, yet we passed unscathed. Each obstacle felt like a test, and each success strengthened our bond, not just to one another, but to the cathedral itself. A shadow fell across the chamber, and I knew the overseers had entered. Massive forms, clad in twisted armor, their chains words whining with anticipation, moved toward us. Mara trembled, and I could feel the sentinel ripple beneath my fingers, urging patience. There was a way through, a sequence we had to follow, and it depended on keeping calm, on using the fear of our enemies against them. I squared my shoulders, feeling the hum guide every movement. For the first time, I understood that size did not matter. Courage, cunning, and connection to the forge mattered far more. And then, a single voice, high and shrill, cut through the chaos. "There they are!" An overseer pointed, and in the metallic reflection of the chamber, I saw dozens of pairs of angry eyes turning toward us. Yet I did not flinch. The forge pulsed, the sentinel whispered, and I knew we were ready. The overseers advanced, their chainsword slicing the air in mechanical arcs, yet the forge seemed to anticipate their every move. Sparks leapt like living things. Molten rivulets hissed and reshaped themselves as if the cathedral were aware of my small companions and me. My hands, guided by the pulse beneath the floor, moved instinctively. I tapped levers, rerouted power conduits, and the massive machinery responded, opening paths, blocking attacks, and giving us cover. Mara and Jessa followed blindly, trusting me, and their trust gave me strength I had not known I possessed. I felt fear, yes. My heart thumped violently, and sweat stung my eyes, but the sentinel within the forge hummed in synchrony with my breath. Each step was a message, a whisper from the cathedral itself. I could almost hear it speaking. "Move, wait, strike when the pattern allows." It was a voice without sound, a rhythm I could follow and understand. The overseers, despite their size and rage, were caught in their own arrogance, predictable in a way that only the small, careful, and observant could exploit. One of the larger overseers lunged for Mara, his armored fist descending like a falling star. I ducked instinctively, pushing Mara aside just in time. Sparks sprayed from the contact, burning the metal around us, but neither of us was touched. The sentinel's pulse surged, a warning and a promise. We could survive, but only if we trusted the cathedral, if we moved as one with it. Through the shadows, I saw a control panel dangling from twisted cables. Illuminated by the occasional flare of molten metal, it was too high for any of us to reach directly, but the forge itself seemed to guide a platform downward. My fingers grazed the panel, and an array of lights blinked to life. Massive gears above shifted, redirecting the overseer's path, forcing them into the open where sparks and molten streams could slow them. Mara and Jessa followed me onto the makeshift platform, their small bodies pressed together, trembling yet determined. The overseers roared, their chainswords tearing at metal that had been twisted into impossible shapes. Sparks showered like rain, and one massive figure swung wildly, knocking over a molten column. I felt the heat singe my hair, and Mara cried out, but the forge's pulse remained steady, a heartbeat guiding us. I realized then that we were no longer just running. We were orchestrating the cathedral, using its massive, chaotic machinery as both shield and weapon. Jessa pointed toward a massive conduit, its surface glowing with unspent energy. "We can trap them," she shouted, her small voice full of exhilaration and fear. I nodded, understanding instantly. With a combination of levers, pulleys, and timing dictated by the pulse beneath us, we directed molten flows to block the overseer's path, forcing them into confined spaces where their size became a liability. The cathedral itself became our ally, responding to the rhythm of our movements, amplifying the chaos against those who had sought to control us. One by one, the overseers faltered, their overconfidence undone by the precise timing and cunning of 3 small girls and the will of the forge. Sparks hissed against armor, molten metal surged, and shadows twisted in ways that disoriented even the largest enemies. And through it all, I realized the truth. The forge had chosen its instruments not by size or strength, but by courage and awareness. We were children, yes, but we were connected to something far older, far smarter, far more relentless than the adults who thought they could enslave us. At last, the chamber fell silent, save for the hum of machinery and the dripping of molten residue cooling into twisted shapes. The overseers were trapped, their fury contained, and for the first time Mara and Jessa and I stood still, taking in the magnitude of what we had done. The forge's pulse settled around us, warm and steady, acknowledging our triumph. My chest heaved, my small hands shaking, but I knew we had survived because we were clever, because we had trusted each other. And because we had listened, I looked at my companions, their wide eyes reflecting fear, wonder, and awe. They had followed me, and in doing so, they had learned what I was beginning to understand. Size and age meant nothing here. The forge did not care for weakness or strength in the usual sense. It cared only for awareness, for connection, for the courage to act when everything else screamed to run. And somewhere deep within the cathedral, beyond the molten rivers and writhing machinery, I felt a new presence. A pulse that was not entirely mine, not entirely the forge's, but something alive and ancient, waiting. I had survived the shadows, but I knew the forge had more to teach, and that our trials had only just begun. We did not linger. The overseers were trapped, yes, but their fury was contained only temporarily. Sparks crackled along the walls, molten metal hissed in anger, and the cathedral thrummed like a heartbeat ready to explode. I grasped Mara's hand, feeling the tremor of her tiny fingers against mine, and Jessa followed close behind, her breathing sharp and uneven. Every shadow seemed alive, every shape a potential threat, but also a guide. The forge was teaching us, testing us, revealing secrets through the very way it moved and roared. We moved deeper into the chamber, the machinery looming higher than any of us had dared imagine. Pipes twisted like serpents, conveyor belts carried objects that defied description, and the smell of heated metal and oil stung our nostrils. I could hear the faint whine of servitors, their motions slow and deliberate, but I avoided them. I did not yet trust their purpose, though I could feel the cathedral's pulse leading me past them. Each step was deliberate, calculated. The smallest misstep could send molten death raining down. Mara shivered, but she did not speak. She did not need to. We understood each other without words. I knew her fear, her wonder, her determination to survive, just as she understood mine. Jessa, always impulsive, tried to grab a loose cable, thinking it would help us swing across a molten channel. I caught her hand, yanking her back just in time, my small voice whispering, "Wait, listen, the cathedral will tell us." The moment she stopped struggling, the cable shifted slightly as if the forge itself approved. Timing, patience, observation. These were our weapons, sharper than any blade. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, and I froze. Mara and Jessa pressed against me, sensing my hesitation. The floor vibrated beneath our tiny feet. Molten conduits shifted, rising to block paths, and a deep voice, or perhaps a memory of one, whispered through the machinery. I could not place its words, not entirely, but the meaning was clear. They are not ready. They are children. Yet they may yet become instruments. My pulse quickened. The cathedral was alive, yes, But it was testing us, measuring us. It wanted to see if we were more than small, frightened girls. We pressed onward, following the rhythm of the pulse beneath the floor. Each step revealed a new horror, the remains of those who had failed before us, machinery twisted around them as if mocking their bodies, shadows of servitors caught in molten flows. The images were terrible, but we did not flinch. The fear became fuel. The shadows became guides. I began to understand that survival here was not about brute force, but about seeing through terror, understanding the pattern beneath it. Then we reached a chamber that made me gasp. Massive, impossible, and alive with light, it pulsed with molten energy that seemed to breathe. It was a crucible, a heart of the forge, where raw material was transformed into weapons and servitors, into things that should never exist. And at its center, suspended in a cage of glowing energy, was a figure, an adult, not one of the overseers, but someone else entirely. They were still terrified but alive. The cathedral had preserved them. I realized then that the forge had a purpose beyond punishment. It created, yes, but it also tested, selecting the clever, the small, the observant, and giving them a chance to survive and perhaps grow stronger. Mara and Jessa clutched my hands as I approached the edge of the energy cage. My pulse synced with the cathedral's rhythm, and I understood instinctively what I had to do. Carefully, I manipulated the levers and conduits, redirecting the molten energy to form a path, not to burn, but to shield. The figure inside stirred, looking at us with wide, fearful eyes, and for the first time I felt a surge of purpose. We were not just children fleeing or hiding. We were becoming something else. Instruments of the cathedral, its smallest and most precise tools. I realized that surviving the forge required more than cunning. It required courage, the ability to act without hesitation, and the willingness to guide others, even when fear threatened to paralyze us. Mara and Jessa mirrored my movements, following instinctively, trusting me, and together, we formed a unity that the cathedral acknowledged, but I could feel it. Deep in the molten veins beneath our feet, the forge had more trials ahead. Shadows moved where light should have been, molten rivers twisted in impossible directions, and the cathedral's pulse quickened. Survival was not guaranteed. And as we prepared to move onward, deeper into the heart of the forge, I knew one truth with absolute clarity. The smallest hands could shape the fate of all who dared to enter this place. We stepped onto the path I had formed with trembling hands, molten energy humming beneath our feet. The warmth was more than heat. It was awareness, a living thing that acknowledged our presence. I felt Mara's grip tighten on mine, her eyes wide but resolute. Jessa shuffled behind us, whispering soft prayers to gods I did not recognize, hoping they would guide us. I did not speak. Words could betray us here. Every sound could echo through the cathedral's twisting halls, revealing us to the unseen eyes that watched. The deeper we moved, the more the forge revealed itself. Machines of impossible scale rotated with deliberate menace. Clawed arms grasped materials too large to carry, and chains of glowing metal swung like serpents in synchronized motion. Every movement was calculated, yet alive, and I realized that the cathedral itself had intelligence. Not human, not servitor, not demon, but something else entirely. It judged us in silence, weighing our choices, noting how we navigated fear. The smaller, the lighter, the less imposing. We were perfect in ways the adults never could be. Then the first obstacle appeared. A cascade of molten rivulets blocked our path. The heat radiated like a living thing, and the air shimmered with molten light. Jessa froze. Mara bit her lip, unsure how to proceed. I studied the flow, noting how it pulsed, slowed, and shifted. It was as if the cathedral allowed movement only for those who observed it, those who learned its rhythm. One careful step, another, and I led them across, holding my breath as the molten streams hissed dangerously close. Our tiny feet found purchase on the cooled ridges, the heat singing our skin but not burning it. We reached a larger chamber beyond, walls lined with glowing conduits, their patterns forming spirals and runes that pulsed in time with the cathedral's heartbeat. Here the forge's intelligence was most visible. The energy seemed to move as if alive, splitting and merging, responding to our smallest movements. I realized with a thrill that the forge was testing our minds, not just our bodies. It was asking questions, and every choice we made answered them. A low rumble shook the chamber. Shadows moved at impossible angles, stretching across walls and ceilings. I could see forms of adults caught in machinery, frozen in positions that told stories of defiance and despair. Their faces, etched in terror, reminded us of the stakes, but even as the horror pressed close, I did not falter. My hands found another lever, sending a pulse of energy along the floor that shifted a hanging mass of molten metal, creating a bridge. Mara and Jessa followed without hesitation, their faith in me unwavering. And then I saw it. A figure, small and human-shaped, crouched behind a massive forge column. It was another child, perhaps captured like us, yet too afraid to move. Her eyes shone with fear and wonder as she watched our passage. I motioned to her silently, urging her forward, promising safety, and she obeyed, trusting instinct more than knowledge. That trust, fragile but real, ignited a warmth in me that had nothing to do with the forge. Leadership was terrifying but necessary. Without it, we would fail, alone and small, crushed under the cathedral's endless machinery. The pulse of the forge quickened again. I felt it in my chest, in my small, trembling limbs. It was as if the cathedral demanded more, testing how far we could go, how much courage we could summon. Ahead, a massive gear slowly rotated, threatening to crush anything that misstepped. I studied it, counting the moments, measuring the rotation, and then led my group across in precise sequence, timing our steps to its slow rhythm. Behind us, the other child followed, clinging to Mara, trusting that we would not fail. As we reached the far side, I felt the cathedral's judgment shift. The pulse slowed, steady now, approving in a subtle, imperceptible way. I did not know if it would last, or if the next chamber would demand more. But in that instant, I understood the truth. Survival here was not about size, strength, or even fearlessness. It was about perception, timing, unity, and courage. We were small, yes, but the forge had seen that size did not matter. We mattered, and yet I knew this was only the beginning. Deeper chambers waited, darker trials, greater horrors. But we had crossed the first true threshold, proving to the cathedral that we could act, think, and endure. Mara's hand squeezed mine. Jessa whispered thanks, and the newest girl clung to both of us, trembling but alive. We were no longer merely children running from the forge. We were its witnesses, its participants, and perhaps, if we were clever enough, its inheritors. The air thickened as we moved into the next chamber. Here, the forge's presence was undeniable. Sparks leapt like predatory insects, igniting the shadows in unnatural patterns along walls that seemed to twist with every blink. The smell of ozone mixed with the iron tang of blood, and I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. My small frame made me invisible to most dangers, But the cathedral's machines were no ordinary obstacles. They were predators with patience, and patience made them lethal. Mara and Jessa followed my steps closely, trusting my instinct, though fear colored every gesture. I saw the forge watching us in the subtle pulses of its energy. Each swing of a mechanical arm, each hiss of molten metal was a question. Could we adapt? Could we survive? Could we understand the rhythm of death disguised as work? Our success did not depend on force. It depended on noticing the tiniest cues, the smallest shifts, the imperceptible tells of the living cathedral. A sudden screech tore through the chamber, metal grinding against metal. I ducked instinctively, pulling the others behind a wall of glowing conduits. Sparks rained like fireflies, and I caught a glimpse of an adult caught mid-motion, pinned beneath a swinging mass of metal. Their scream was cut off, swallowed by the cathedral's laughter. Or was it just the echo of fear? I didn't pause to consider. Survival demanded movement, not pity. I took a deep breath and counted the seconds. Machines moved with mechanical elegance following their cycles. We had to anticipate, to time our steps with precision. One misstep, one hesitation, and the cathedral would claim us. I led them across a network of raised platforms, each one suspended above rivers of molten promethium. Mara's legs trembled, Jessa's lips quivered, but I could feel the quiet determination in their hearts, the same fierce spark I carried in my own. In the corner of the chamber, I noticed a small panel, half hidden beneath a tangle of wires. It hummed faintly like a whisper of thought. My fingers itched to touch it, but hesitation held me back. It could be a trap, a signal, or a key. I had learned that on this world, curiosity could be both salvation and doom. With a nod, I indicated to Mara and Jessa to cover my back. I stepped forward, fingertips brushing the panel, feeling a pulse of energy leap into my mind. The cathedral shivered, recoiling, and then seemed to settle, as if approving my audacity. Suddenly, the shadows shifted differently. A new presence, heavier, slower, but unmistakably alive, emerged from the darkness. A chaos war machine, hulking and scarred, lumbered toward us. Its pilot, an adult corrupted beyond recognition, bellowed orders that twisted with heresy. The cathedral reacted immediately, the machinery adapting its rhythm to accommodate the threat. I realized then that the forge could fight alongside us if we understood its language, if we moved in concert with its patterns. I raised my hand subtly, signaling Mara and Jessa to move as one. Timing was everything. The forge's arms lifted, redirected the molten rivers, and created a corridor of safety. Sparks flew as the corrupted adult struck blindly, smashing machinery that no longer served us. The chamber roared, molten metal cascading, yet we passed through, untouched by forces that would have crushed anyone larger, slower, or less attentive. The youngest girl, the one who had joined us reluctantly, clung to my coat. Her wide eyes reflected both terror and wonder. I whispered that she was safe, though I could not promise her the future. In this place, safety was a temporary rhythm, a pattern maintained only by awareness and courage. Every step forward demanded sacrifice, and yet, each success gave us more than survival. It gave us control, however small, over the cathedral that sought to consume us. As we reached the far edge of the chamber, a faint glow beckoned from above. A spiral staircase woven from light and metal, the forge's pulse slowed, its questions lingering like a shadow at our backs. We had survived the gauntlet, faced the shadows, and emerged intact, but I knew that the trials ahead would demand more. Bigger, faster, and more horrifying machines awaited, and the cathedral's attention would no longer be forgiving. I felt a quiet thrill as we began to ascend. Mara's hand stayed tight in mine, Jessa whispered blessings, and the smallest girl pressed close, trusting my lead. I had become the guide, the protector, the leader, and the weight of that responsibility settled like armor across my shoulders. The forge had tested us, but it had also shown us that we could move through it alive, that we could bend its rhythm to our own. And somewhere in the shadows above, I sensed that the cathedral had noticed more than just our survival. It had seen our potential. I could not yet know what awaited at the summit, what horrors or revelations the next chamber held, but I felt the pulse of the forge in my bones, calling me forward. Forward was the only way to live. Forward, through shadows, through fire, through the cathedral's living heart. The staircase spiraled upward, a twisting helix of metal and light that seemed alive beneath our feet. Each step vibrated faintly, humming with the residual energy of the forge below, as if the entire world were breathing through its machinery. I led the girls carefully, their small hands gripping mine, their eyes wide with wonder and dread. The air grew thinner here, acrid with the heat of unseen furnaces, and yet the pull of discovery pushed us onward. From above, I could see glimpses of chambers we had yet to enter, corridors lined with towering statues of iron and bronze, their faces frozen in expressions of devotion twisted into agony, pipes coiled like serpents along the walls, hissing with steam, venting smoke that smelled of promethium and burnt flesh. I swallowed hard, realizing that the scale of the forge's horror was far greater than anything I had imagined. Every corner seemed to conceal danger. Every shadow could hide a predator or trap. Mara's foot caught on a protruding bolt, and she yelped, clutching my arm. I steadied her, whispering for calm. The smallest girl clung tighter, shivering against me, her wide eyes fixed on the moving shadows beneath the glowing rails. Jessa's gaze was sharper, scanning ahead for threats, her mind already calculating the next moves. I knew I could not falter. They needed me to be steady, to think clearly, to find paths through the chaos that even the machines might hesitate to crush. Then we heard it. A low, mechanical groan, almost like the forge itself had sensed us, had recognized our presence as something unusual. The vibrations beneath our feet shifted, and I realized that the path ahead was not just a staircase, it was a challenge. The entire structure seemed to pulse, testing our reflexes, measuring our courage. My fingers tightened on Mara's hand, and I whispered that we must move as one, that every small girl's step mattered in this living nightmare. We emerged into a new chamber, a cathedral-like space where molten metal flowed in channels along the floor like rivers of fire. Huge forges roared in rhythm, each one manned by twisted, corrupted adults whose movements were unnaturally synchronized. They swung massive hammers, welded grotesque machinery, and sang in discordant voices that reverberated against the chamber walls. I felt the small girls stiffen beside me, but I kept moving. We had to observe, learn, and adapt. Hesitation could cost us everything. I spotted a control panel, elevated above the molten rivers, shimmering faintly with a pulse that matched the forge's heartbeat. If we could reach it, we might manipulate the chamber itself, bend the machinery to our favor. I assessed the distance and the timing, feeling the rhythm of the forge in my mind. Each swing of a hammer, each spark that leapt, each hiss of venting steam, everything was part of a pattern. And if we could move in step with it, we could survive. I gestured for the girls to follow, pointing toward a narrow platform that led across the rivers of molten metal. Their tiny feet carried them nimbly, and I marveled at their courage. They were small, yes, but their minds were sharp, their instincts keen. Each step was a victory against fear, each successful leap a declaration that we would not be consumed. As we neared the control panel, I realized the corrupted adults had noticed us. Their hammers swung faster, their chants rose in pitch, and I felt the first true surge of danger. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached the panel, pressing my hands to the glowing surface. Energy surged through me, and the chamber seemed to pause, as if the forge were holding its breath. Sparks froze midair, molten rivers hesitated, and the adults stopped in mid-motion, caught in the delicate balance between our survival and their aggression. I had never felt power like this, raw and dangerous, yet precise. The girls watched me, eyes wide, and I whispered that this was our chance. Our chance to take control, to shape our destiny in a place that had never intended us to live. The smallest girl's grip on my sleeve was firm now, steadier than before, and I felt a surge of pride and fear at once. We were children, enslaved and small, but here, we were becoming something else, something the forge itself might recognize. If not respect, the chamber's pulse began to return, slower, measured differently. As I directed the energy, molten streams diverted, platforms shifted, and the corrupted adults stumbled, caught off balance. For a brief shining moment, I realized that we were no longer just survivors. We were participants, capable of changing the rhythm of this hellish world. And as the forge shifted beneath our hands, I saw it, a narrow passage beyond the chamber, dark and beckoning, promising both discovery and danger. We had passed one test, but the forge was endless, and the shadows above and beyond whispered that the worst trials were still ahead. We moved cautiously through the newly opened passage, the air thick with heat and the smell of scorched metal. Each step echoed against walls lined with jagged conduits, the vibrations carrying through our bones like distant thunder. The girls followed silently, their small forms pressed close to mine, shadows within the greater shadow. I could feel their tension, the tight knot of fear and determination that bound them to survival. The corridor twisted downward, narrowing until we had to walk in a single line. Pipes overhead hissed unpredictably, some venting jets of flame that made the walls shimmer. I raised a hand to signal a halt, and the girls froze instantly, every instinct honed by weeks of work in the forge. Mara's breath came in quick bursts, and I reached out to brush her hair back, grounding her. We were alone here, but the sense of unseen eyes pressing from the walls made the silence almost unbearable. Ahead, faint red light pulsed like a heartbeat, coming from what appeared to be a large chamber. The air felt alive, charged with energy that hummed in our bones. I knew without thinking that we were close to something important, something the forge itself guarded. The smallest girl clutched my sleeve so tightly that it hurt, and I whispered that she must trust me, even when everything in her instincts screamed danger. She nodded, eyes wide, courage slowly replacing fear. As we entered the chamber, the source of the pulsing light revealed itself. A colossal, unfinished machine dominated the space, its surfaces covered in intricate glyphs and strange, arcane runes that seemed to shift when we weren't looking directly at them. The machine was silent, yet it radiated power, a cold and terrible intelligence that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. The girls gasped softly, and I felt a pang of guilt. I had led them here, into the presence of something we could barely understand. Suddenly, a low mechanical growl echoed through the chamber. Not a sound of engines, but a voice, deep and resonant, vibrating through the floor and walls. The machine was aware. I knelt to gather the girls closer, whispering that we must remain calm, that panic could mean death. Its voice grew louder, almost recognizably human, as if it remembered what we were, or perhaps it remembered what we could become. My mind spun with terror and awe in equal measure. A figure emerged from the shadows, an adult, a corrupted technician, but unlike the others we had seen. He carried a warhammer nearly as tall as himself, the head glowing with raw promethium energy. His eyes were wild, and his grin revealed the madness that the forge nurtured. The girls froze, but Jessa stepped forward slightly, a small defiance in her posture. She had always been quick to act, to assess danger before it struck, and I silently cursed her boldness, yet admired it. The technician swung his hammer, and the air around it sizzled, molten sparks leaping from the ground. I grabbed the girls, pulling them low as he struck the floor where we had stood. The chamber shuddered with the impact, but the machine's pulsing light flared brighter, almost protective. It was as if the presence of the children, our smallness and our courage, had awakened a force the adults had never anticipated. I realized then that this machine was not just a tool of the forge. It was something else, something forbidden, something the Imperium would have eradicated if they had known. It seemed to judge us, not with malice, but with an intent almost alien in its purity. The technician, enraged that his control over the chamber faltered, advanced again. The girls clung to me, their fear now tempered with resolve. They were no longer simply running, they were witnesses, participants in a moment that could change everything in this corner of the galaxy. I whispered quickly to them, guiding their small hands toward the glowing glyphs on the machine. The symbols pulsed beneath our fingers, and I felt energy flow into us. Not harmful, but alive, demanding understanding. Sparks danced around our hands, and for the briefest instant, I felt the power of the forge bend to us. The technician roared in frustration, his hammer swinging, but the machine reacted first. Energy arcs shot from its runes, striking the floor between us and him, forcing him backward. The girl's eyes reflected the red glow, wide with fear and wonder. In that instant, I understood the truth. We were small, yes, and enslaved, yes, but the machine recognized potential where the forge had seen only labor. It saw courage, intelligence, and adaptability, and it responded. I felt a surge of hope, mingled with fear. Hope that we could survive, and fear of what this power might demand of us in return. We had passed through one layer of horror, but the chamber ahead promised more. The machine pulsed again, as if beckoning, and I knew our path forward was not just through the forge, but through understanding what it truly was, and what we could do with it. Our journey was far from over, and the shadows of the forge stretched endlessly before us. The girls and I pressed forward, every sense straining against the oppressive weight of the forge. The chamber's pulsing light now guided us, casting our shadows long and thin across the scorched floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself resisted our passage. I glanced at Mara and Jessa. Their small hands clutched the edges of my cloak, knuckles white, but their eyes, oh, their eyes, gleamed with a fragile, fierce determination. They were beginning to see that our size did not make us powerless. The technician had retreated for the moment, nursing his bruised pride, but his presence still lingered like a threat in the smoke-filled corners of the room. Every metallic clang, every hiss of venting promethium made us flinch, made the girls pull closer. I whispered assurances, even as my own heart raced. We were small. The world we inhabited was built for giants, for the twisted adults who had molded it into a machine of horror. And yet, we moved, unseen and underestimated, like shadows curling between the teeth of a predator. The pulsing light from the machine shifted, as if reacting to our tentative steps. The glyphs beneath our fingertips shimmered, warm beneath the touch of tiny hands. The girls exchanged glances, a silent conversation of hope and fear. They had begun to understand something I had suspected all along. There was a will behind this forge, something that responded to courage, to intelligence, to unity. Something that saw potential where the forge's overseer saw only expendable flesh. We approached a massive set of doors, welded shut but etched with even more intricate symbols than the machine itself. The glow of our companion, the machine, I corrected myself silently, rose in intensity, casting a red haze across the corridor. I knelt before the doors, my small fingers tracing the glyphs, feeling their resonance. A hum began to grow in my chest, not coming from me but through me, as if the machine's energy could reach across our bodies, guiding us. Mara's hand joined mine, Jessa's followed, and for a heartbeat we were not just children. We were conduits, part of something far greater. Then the technician struck again. He banged on the doors with the edge of his hammer, sparks flying as if the Prometheum itself recoiled at his touch. His growl reverberated through the chamber. He shouted something about obedience, about duty, but the words were drowned in the rising hum of the machine. I stood, holding the girls close, and stepped toward the doors. The symbols pulsed faster, brighter, responding to our presence. The machine, I realized, was not passive. It had chosen to engage with us, and in doing so, had granted us a form of power the adults would never have considered. A faint heat brushed our faces, a warning, but also a promise. I whispered to the girls, "We can do this, together." They nodded, small but resolute, and I guided their hands to press on the glowing glyphs. Energy coursed through us, not painfully, but like a tide lifting us from the bottom of a dark ocean. The doors quivered, metal groaning and bending, and a shudder ran through the chamber. The technician stumbled back, his face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and rage. As the doors slowly opened, the glow from the chamber beyond spilled over us, revealing a space vast beyond comprehension, filled with spinning gears and distant fires that illuminated the scale of the forge. This was the heart, the pulse of the machine, and I knew that stepping inside would change everything. The girls clutched me, but their resolve had hardened. They were ready as anyone could be, to face what lurked within. I took a deep breath, feeling the heat and vibration of the forge's core pressing against our small bodies, and stepped through. The machine hummed louder, almost approvingly, as if acknowledging our courage. We had passed the first real test, but the heart of the forge held horrors yet unseen. Creations designed for pain, for war, for the adults who had shaped this world. And we, mere children, were about to meet them on our own terms. For a fleeting moment, I saw the faces of all the girls, eyes wide but unyielding, and I understood. It was not just survival that had driven us here. It was the awakening of something greater, something that might yet turn the forge's own machinery against those who had enslaved us. And in that understanding, hope and terror collided, leaving only one truth. The journey was far from over, and we had already begun to change the world around us. The chamber beyond the doors was a cathedral of iron and fire, each pillar a vein of Prometheum, each gear a heart-pumping life into the endless machine. It was vast beyond measure, and yet we moved through it as if we belonged. The girls' small feet barely made a sound on the grated floor, their eyes darting to every shadow, every movement. I could feel the hum of the machinery beneath our hands and fingertips, vibrating through the soles of our boots, through the bone of our fingers, connecting us to something ancient, something that had been waiting for us to arrive. Mara led the way, her courage blossoming like a tiny flame in the choking smoke. She reached a control panel nearly as tall as she was, a lattice of wires and symbols, each pulse echoing the beat of the machine itself. I crouched beside her, whispering guidance as best I could. The girls had begun to learn the language of the forge, not in words, but in touch, in instinct. Every symbol we pressed, every lever we nudged, responded to us. For the first time, I felt that the machine was not a weapon of oppression, but a gate, a puzzle meant to be unlocked by those who understood its hidden rhythm. Then a scream echoed through the forge, sharp and full of anger. The technician had recovered from his shock, rallying a group of adult overseers to pursue us. They moved like storms of flesh and armor, heavy and unthinking, yet somehow the shadows protected us. We slipped past their patrols, ducking into niches and tunnels that only children of our size could navigate. I could see the surprise in their faces when they caught only empty corridors, when the sound of their own footsteps mocked them from the wrong direction. We came to a spiral of catwalks suspended above a glowing pit of molten metal. The heat was unbearable, but the girls pressed forward, their small forms braving the furnace's breath. I held Jessa close as she peered over the edge, her mouth a thin line of fear and wonder. The pit seemed to pulse with the life of the forge, as if the metal itself had a consciousness, and it acknowledged our presence. Every spark that rose like fireflies, every hiss of the molten flow, was a heartbeat, and we had synchronized with it. Suddenly, the technician's voice rang out, booming and filled with rage. "Children, you dare touch what only we are worthy of?" His words fell into the void, swallowed by the roar of the machinery. But I could feel his intent, his aggression, as if it were a tangible force trying to shove us aside, to push us back. I tightened my grip on the girls' hands, feeling their tiny fists squeeze in unison, and the machine responded. The pulsing light in the catwalk beneath our feet shifted, shielding us, bending the shadows to hide our passage. At the top of the spiral, we reached a chamber unlike any we had seen, the core of the forge, a space where molten gears floated in midair, powered by some arcane energy that defied the natural laws. Symbols floated like constellations, burning with a light that warmed and frightened in equal measure. Mara stepped forward, small and determined, and placed her hand on one of the glyphs. A tremor ran through the chamber, a vibration that made the hair on our necks stand on end. The core responded to her courage, to her willingness to engage directly with the heart of the forge. I realized then what the girls and I had become. Not slaves, not mere survivors, but participants. We were rewriting the rules of this place simply by existing in it. The machine that had been a weapon of pain had now chosen us as its instruments, and its song was a strange, terrible beauty. The challenge was far from over. The technician would not relent. The overseers would not rest. But for the first time, hope glimmered like a spark among the infernal shadows. And in that hope, I saw the future, small hands moving the impossible, girls daring the forbidden, and a single act of courage turning the tide in a world built for giants. The forge's core hummed, acknowledging us, inviting us forward, and I knew the girls would not falter. The battle ahead would test everything we had learned, everything we were capable of. But as we prepared to descend into the very heart of the machine, one truth remained clear. Even in a world of overwhelming terror, even on a planet ruled by chaos, courage could still take root in the smallest of forms. We moved with deliberate caution, our small frames weaving through the labyrinth of towering machinery. Every clang of metal above was a reminder that we were being watched, measured, tested. The adults believed themselves untouchable, invincible by virtue of size and strength, but they could not see the ways in which the shadows themselves had begun to shelter us. The forge had its own eyes, and it had chosen us as its witnesses, its agents. Mara led the front, her small shoulders squared, eyes burning with determination. She reached out instinctively to the mechanisms that were far too complex for anyone her age, and yet somehow, her fingers danced along the levers and conduits with an understanding that bordered on instinctual genius. Sparks of promethium hissed and leapt, illuminating the fear etched on the faces of the overseers as they tried and failed to keep up with our movements. They stumbled through corridors, too tall, too slow, blinded by the very architecture they believed would protect them. I kept close to Jessa, who was trembling but fighting to hide it. Her wide eyes reflected the infernal glow of molten metal and energy conduits that hummed with chaotic life. She was learning, slowly like the rest of us, to anticipate the forge's responses, to sense its patterns in a way that adults never could. There was a rhythm here, a pulse that whispered secrets of construction and destruction, and we were beginning to listen. Each step we took in sync with it magnified our abilities. Then came the first major obstacle, a corridor lined with torsion blades, spinning endlessly, humming with lethal precision. To an adult, navigating this would require skill honed over years. To us, it was a test of intuition, of trust in one another. Mara looked back and nodded, a small but commanding gesture. We advanced together, following her lead. Our tiny hands and nimble movements allowed us to slip past the deadly arcs with ease, while the larger overseers could only watch, trapped by their own bulk, unable to follow. One careless step sent a blade tearing through an empty space where a man had once been. Silence fell momentarily, punctuated by the hiss of molten metal and the soft, steady heartbeat of the girl's courage. Beyond the corridor, the core's influence grew stronger. The very air shimmered with energy, carrying a taste of ozone and burning promethium, filling our lungs with something almost sacred. I could feel it bending slightly toward Mara, as if acknowledging her will, her bravery, her willingness to risk everything for the rest of us. It was more than guidance. It was empowerment. Each girl began to feel her own potential magnify in the presence of the forge. Small hands became precise instruments, small minds became clever engineers, and fear became a weapon we could wield against those who underestimated us. A sudden crash echoed from below, and the technician's enraged voice cut through the mechanical symphony. "Do not let them reach the core." But his fury was futile. The forge itself moved to shield us, hiding our passage from the bulk of the adult guards. I realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, that the machine was alive in ways we could barely comprehend. It had accepted us, not as laborers, not as slaves, but as the rightful inheritors of its hidden knowledge. At the center of the chamber we paused, the molten gears floating like a constellation of fire above us. Each girl's eyes were wide, not with fear but with understanding, catching glimpses of the forge's purpose beyond mere production. It was a crucible, a place where courage could manifest and small hands could shape destiny. Mara reached up once more, touching the glyphs, and the energy pulsed around her like a heartbeat, confirming that she was no longer just a participant. She was becoming the key to something far greater than any of us had imagined. As we prepared to move deeper, to confront the last obstacles between us and the core's hidden mechanisms, I felt a quiet confidence settle over the group. The girls had learned to trust not only the forge, but each other. We were no longer frightened captives. We were a force, invisible to those who relied on size and strength, yet unstoppable in ways they could not perceive. The forge had awakened us, and in return, we would awaken its true purpose. And so, with shadows bending to our will and courage guiding every step, we pressed onward, unaware that the greatest trial and the moment that would crown one of us as a true hero was only a few steps away. The forge's labyrinth had tested our small bodies, our quick minds, and our courage. We had slipped past deadly blades, outmaneuvered towering adults, and felt the pulse of the machine acknowledging us as something more than children. In Mara, the others glimpsed not just a leader but a spark of heroism, a force that could bend even the chaos of the forge to her will. Shadows and light danced around us as we prepared to face the next challenge, knowing the true trial, the one that would decide who among us would rise, was yet to come.